If you live in London, you've probably heard of Elephant and Castle. But if you haven't been to the area recently, I doubt you think of it as a bit of an urban paradise. It's probably more likely that you think about wide gaping roads full of traffic and huge monotonous buildings. Isn't it just a big grey roundabout? I used to think like that as well, but I've grown to love the place as I've discovered more of the area beyond the roundabout. So this video is just a good excuse to tell you why I like Elephant and Castle. We'll start with the roundabout, which isn't actually a roundabout anymore because they've reclaimed a part of it to create new public space. This is, after all, where Elephant and Castle began. The area sat at the confluence of several of the major roads feeding into London Bridge and connecting London with the south, and so naturally a settlement formed here. I won't go into much detail about why the area has such a distinct name, as Jago Hazard has that covered, and I've provided a link to his video in the description. A common belief is that it gained its name from a pub which once stood in the area, but this pub actually opened after the Elephant and Castle name had already been adopted. It grew to significance in the 1700s after the building of Westminster Bridge, before which the only way to cross the Thames within London itself was by going over London Bridge. And so now Elephant and Castle found itself ideally situated for access to both the City of London as well as Westminster and the rapidly expanding West End. By the Victorian era, it had been swallowed into London's urban mass. Before long, Elephant wasn't only connected by road to the City and West End, but by tube too. It became known as the Piccadilly of South London, a great convergence of roads and trade and a thriving hub for shopping with multiple high streets and department stores. But the area was heavily bombed during World War II, and rebuilding occurred when people were more optimistic about really wide roads. In 1965, a new shopping centre was built amidst two roundabouts, but the area quickly became somewhere to drive through rather than spend any time in. When people think of Elephant and Castle, I reckon this or something similar is most likely to be the image in their heads. But recently some effort has been made to make Elephant and Castle a destination again. This is Elephant Park, located on the site of the former Heygate Estate. The estate had been built in 1971 in a Corbusian style, tall blocks connected by walkways in the sky forming a wall around a central garden with smaller housing. This central garden had been described as an urban forest. It was home to over 3,000 people living in 1,212 homes, 84% of which were council-owned social housing. The remainder were owned privately under the Right to Buy scheme. The estate was a popular place to live. The flats were light and spacious, and the location was perfect for accessing all parts of London. But the 1970s and 80s were challenging decades for British cities. They faced spiralling urban decline. In addition, suburbanisation enabled anyone with enough money to escape the inner city for the lure of a bigger house and a garden. Population decline is one of the worst things that can happen to a city. With fewer people supporting the local economy, job losses follow and the cycle is intensified. Crucially, with a lower tax base, local authorities have less money to spend on maintenance and local services, and this further pushes people away. Estates like the Heygate came to symbolise British urban decline. The aerial walkways, or streets in the sky, which had originally been designed to safely separate cars and people, were now described as a mugger's paradise. But, as I find with all areas of London, sometimes the reputation is worse than the reality. In the year 2000, Heygate residents were given a questionnaire about life on the estate. This was back when Southwark Council were first drawing up plans for its redevelopment. 55% answered that they were satisfied with their community and 70% wanted to stay. But the council had calculated that retaining and refurbishing the estate would cost £53 million, about £153 million in today's money. And according to the council, this wouldn't have fixed the estate's fundamental problems, so the decision was taken to demolish and redevelop it instead. 99% of Heygate social housing tenants were relocated to within the borough of Southwark. All tenants were offered homes in Elephant and Castle, according to the council, with 36% of those people opting to remain in the area, and the Heygate estate was finally demolished between 2011 and 2014. But from an urban planning and architecture perspective, I think the redevelopment has generally been an improvement. The old estate was built like a fortress, surrounded by walls and fences several metres high, containing a maze of residential streets which were a bit of a nightmare to walk through on foot if you weren't familiar with the area. And so the redevelopment sought to create clearer pedestrian routes to help open it up, allowing the streets and pedestrian paths to dictate the shape of the urban layout. One of the unique features of the old Heygate estate was its urban forest. Houses were nestled inside a green oasis, and after nearly 40 years of growth, the trees had grown quite large. Campaigners therefore mapped the locations of each tree so that they could be retained. In the new development, they mostly form part of the park, but some of them have been cleverly integrated into the streetscape by surrounding them with rain gardens and flower beds. This gives Elephant Park a unique edge over other new parks and public spaces, which are often described as sterile because they lack the types of big trees that you find in older areas. By retaining the trees, Elephant Park manages to look like somewhere that has always been here. The area is now way more permeable and pleasant for pedestrians, with a high number of high-quality, human-focused spaces which feel a lot more inviting to spend time in. Look at how the restaurant terraces here spill into the park, blurring the boundary between soft nature and the hard edge of the apartment buildings. The buildings themselves complement the park with the use of brick and other natural materials, while the balconies benefit from a great view, which probably makes it feel as though you're living inside a park. And admittedly, the new park doesn't cover a huge area, but clever landscape design allows you to feel as though it's worth exploring. I'd say Elephant Park is far from sterile. Instead, there's a variety of different spaces, large and small. Some are wide open and ideal for playing ball games, but some are tucked away and quite tranquil. Having this variety of different spaces means that a wide spectrum of people are attracted to spending time here. This makes the park well used and helps it to feel safer. It really feels like the heart of the neighbourhood, a third place, as all good public spaces are. It feels like kids and young people were at the heart of the planning for this area. There are plenty of spaces designed for them to explore, free from the dangers of road traffic. I think that places that are designed with children and other vulnerable people in mind tend to benefit everyone, and Elephant Park is a pretty strong example of this. The redevelopment has also brought in some impressive modern architecture as well. This building on Sayer Street might be one of my favourite modern buildings. The massing is nicely broken up in a way which gives the building a crown and asserts it as an elegant landmark. It doesn't scream for attention, and it doesn't have to. Instead, these ground floor retail units help to animate the street and embed it into the streetscape. This plant shop looks like it belongs here. The building sits on a transitional site between the large, blocky high-rises of Elephant and Castle and the more low-rise residential streets to the south into Walworth. For that reason, it's been designed to step down, with this shorter block featuring a chamfered corner which provides a focal point for Walworth Square. While we're here, Walworth Square might be one of my favourite new public spaces in London. Good public spaces are always surrounded by buildings with plenty of windows which provide eyes on the space, making it safer in theory. String lights provide soft illumination for the square at night, and I really like these lantern things in the trees. There's a good amount of greenery which helps to soften the square up, while this tree is another one they left over from before the redevelopment. I think this square is a masterclass in placemaking. Further along, these townhouses have been designed to blend the development into the pre-existing urban fabric, by being built at a similar scale and in a similar form to the more historic terraced houses on the other side of the street. I also quite like these modern interpretations of a typical London mansion block on Rodney Road. To me, they exemplify how to take cues from older styles of architecture whilst still feeling modern and progressive. The balconies are shaped to emulate the types of bay windows that you typically find on Victorian terraces, which are quite common in the area, while the buildings are oriented to follow and define the curve in the street, which gives them an interesting angle when viewed from further along. These rain gardens, which are typically a flower bed designed into the edge of the road, often with trees, are becoming more common throughout London. They enhance the pedestrian environment, making it more beautiful and varied, whilst also providing a natural separation between pedestrians and traffic. Being around trees and plants is great for our mental health and can even reduce blood pressure, while being around nature, however small, helps to keep us emotionally, psychologically and physically healthy. So seeing these rain gardens popping up everywhere makes me happy, and I'm confident that it'll make London a happier and healthier city. And if you weren't already convinced on the benefits of rain gardens, they also help to combat flooding as they soak up water, which then helps the plants grow. Roads and hard surfaces don't really soak up water, instead the water runs off to find a drain, but it can end up doing a lot of damage before it gets there, especially after heavy rain. So more rain gardens mean safer streets, happier people and less flooding. I promise I'm not sponsored by rain gardens. Elephant and Castle's architectural perception is mainly rooted in post-war and modern architecture. We don't tend to associate Elephant and Castle with older buildings or narrow streets lined with historic houses, but there are plenty of these types of areas surrounding it, including these old Victorian tenements known as the Heygate Estate. These old yards are today occupied by architects, dressmakers and jewellery designers, among others. Back at the heart of Elephant and Castle, the latest evolution of the area has already entered its next phase. The old 1960s shopping centre was demolished in 2021. As with the Heygate Estate, demolishing Elephant and Castle's shopping centre was highly controversial. It was a landmark for the area, pulling people in from across London. While in its later years it became a cultural hub for London's Latin community, with a thriving market. 40 businesses were relocated nearby as part of the redevelopment plans. In place of the old shopping centre comes a new shopping centre alongside additional university space for the London College of Communication, workspace, leisure and cultural facilities, a cinema and 1,000 new homes, 35% of which will be classified as affordable. To help combat claims that the development will be exclusively for expensive chain stores, 10% of retail space at the new shopping centre will be designated as affordable as well. The Northern Line tube entrance here will also be upgraded, with new escalators replacing the lift-only access currently in place. I can't comment much on this part of Elephant and Castle because it's still under construction, but to me the plans seem promising. Firstly, they're keeping the majority of the mature trees which had grown on the site, which, as you've probably guessed by now, gets a big thumbs up from me. And there's a mix of different uses which will help the area feel animated at all times of day. This, I think, is kind of where shopping centres like the one built in 1965 largely failed. With no diversity in uses, they were often quiet for most of the day and night. Being a largely indoor shopping centre, it also blocked access across the site, which was frustrating if you wanted to walk through the area. But the new plan seems to remedy this, providing plenty of space and clear through routes for pedestrians and allowing these routes to dictate the shapes of the buildings, much like how cities were planned and built in the past. The plans describe this development as Elephant and Castle's new town centre, and admittedly, I kind of agree. Town centres in the traditional sense include a range of different things: shops, bars, restaurants, homes, leisure, workplaces, and just somewhere to sit and people watch. This plan appears to be trying to deliver exactly that, on a street layout which will feel like a town centre which has organically evolved, like a real town centre. Elephant and Castle lost a bit of its soul when the shopping centre was demolished, leaving in its place a crater for a few years, but I feel confident that with the improvements that have already been made to the area, and what's planned for the future, it's quite rapidly regaining that soul, and a new heart as well. Who knows, maybe the area will once again be known as the Piccadilly of South London. I've been thinking about setting up a YouTube channel to discuss cities, architecture, urban planning and design for a while now. They're all things I'm really passionate about and would like to share my thoughts and ideas on. I'd love to make more videos like this one, and so if you enjoyed the video I'd be grateful if you could like and subscribe, as it will really help me out. Being new to making YouTube videos, I'd also really appreciate any feedback, as that too will help. Thank you so much and see you in the next video.